Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. On Tuesday of next week, President Joe Biden will be making his very first appearance under the big top, the Capitol Dome housing the utter circus that is the Republican-led House of Representatives. Since being taken over by the MAGA caucus, this Congress has thus far been a spectacle, like Newsmax TV or Steve Bannon's podcast in the halls and hearing rooms of Congress. And even after 4 years with Donald Trump in the White House, even many Republican members themselves recognize this as a new level of absurdity. Kevin McCarthy, the mostly feckless Speaker of the House, finally got his first big win yesterday, rallying his caucus to knock Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar off of the Foreign Affairs Committee. But in the immediate aftermath, some Republicans in the caucus who'd voted to do it conceded the victory was not worth the cost. Old Call reporting that following the vote, House Foreign Affairs member Ken Buck, Republican in Colorado, was overheard in an elevator calling it, quote, stupidest vote in the world. Buck initially said he would not go along with McCarthy's plan to remove Omar, but eventually flipped to a yes vote. Back in that elevator, fellow Republican Congressman Mike Simpson of Idaho agreed with Buck, added that all it does is make Omar a martyr. Apparently, at some point, they realized others were listening, and Buck and Simpson urged fellow passengers in the elevator to not let leadership know their thoughts. So that's the state of the House right now. Like the Republican Party overall and its expected 2024 presidential candidates, the MAGA House is fully focused on a bevy of cruel, obsessive, oftentimes even downright comical obsessions. That includes everything from Ilhan Omar's committee assignments to the president's son's laptop. And so it is into that building that Joe Biden will go on Tuesday. He'll have a different backdrop than the one you see there. He will be there to update the American people on the State of the Union. And it will be a bit of a reality check for one half of the audience in the room. It's been 3 years since the pandemic hit. He's just 2 years into his presidency. But Joe Biden will be able to tell a pretty darn good story. And nothing illustrates that better than today's jobs numbers. The Labor Department reported the economy added a staggering 517,000 jobs in the first month of the year. That was way, way, way above expectations. The unemployment rate also dropped to just 3.4%. 3.4%. That is the lowest that metric has been since 1969, the year Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. We also got revised numbers from the past 2 years showing that the U.S. economy added 7.1 million jobs in 2021. That's almost 400,000 more than previously reported. And for 2022, they revised the number up as well by nearly 200,000 for a total of 4.6 million jobs added. Speaking at the White House this morning, President Biden pointed out that his administration is breaking records.
We have created more jobs in 2 years than any presidential term, than any time in 2 years. That's the strongest 2 years of job growth in history by a long shot. Put simply, I would argue the Biden economic plan is working. For the past 2 years, we've heard a chorus of critics write off my economic plan. They said it's just not possible to grow the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. They said we can't bring back American manufacturing. They said we can't make things in America anymore. Well, today's data makes crystal clear what I've always known in my gut. These critics and cynics are wrong.
Many of these new jobs, as the president was alluding to, are being created in blue-collar industries. In the past 2 years, the U.S. economy has created 800,000 manufacturing jobs. In fact, manufacturing is seeing a faster recovery than any other business cycle since the 1950s. And while wage growth overall is starting to slow, we have been seeing that lower wage workers, and this is crucial, the people who make the least, are getting the biggest wage increases. None of this happened by accident. The big lesson that came out of the Great Recession and the financial crisis and its aftermath was that the Recovery Act, the stimulus package, which totaled about $800 billion, ended up just being too small. And in the midst of a crisis like that, you only get one shot to get it right. So since then, a lot of progressive economists have argued for a different model. And they were successful. This time, the Biden administration, the folks in Democratic policy and politics, erred on the side of going too big with the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, one of the first things passed. And people argued it was too much. They had a lot of critics, and they got some ammunition when inflation did, in fact, shoot up quite a bit, and people understandably didn't like it. But the American Rescue Plan helped heat up the economy in the midst of a once-in-a-century pandemic and a recovery. It put truly unprecedented amounts of money in the American people's pockets. Now, when you look at the general economic vision of the Biden administration, ironically, it actually borrows some of the most incoherent yet genuine complaints that actually powered Donald Trump and Trumpism. Biden and his advisors have managed to turn that into actual progressive policy. Here's what I mean by that. So underneath the spectacle and the cruelty and the bigotry and the weirdness of Donald Trump, there was a real critique of the globalized neoliberal economics of the last few decades. The policies that brought us cheap goods and cheap trade, along with a hollowed-out manufacturing sector and middle class that left huge swaths of the country with no industry to speak of. To be clear, Donald Trump didn't actually do anything about that. He just hollered America first, all sorts of xenophobia, and then, when he actually had power, he just cut corporate taxes like every other Republican. But the Biden folks seem to have actually taken the core of the critique seriously. And they have been working hard to rebuild the American manufacturing base with 21st century jobs in green energy and infrastructure improvements and bringing more production of high-tech products to the U.S. Those investments are actually bringing loads of money and jobs to red states, places that have felt left behind and were, I think, attracted to Donald Trump's populist message. Now, there's absolutely no guarantee this will work either on the economics or the politics, particularly not in the long run. I mean, the fact of the matter is, America is still a wildly unequal place. American capitalism is the most unequal almost in anywhere in our developed world. We've got tens of millions of people living in poverty. For a lot of people grinding away at low-paying jobs, facing high prices for everything from food to healthcare, it can feel like not much has changed. But again, you take a step back. You look at these 2 years and this record, which is a record. No president's ever created this many jobs, as the beginning of a different trajectory and a different way of thinking about American economic policy. There is something really promising here. Amazingly, at the tender age of 80, Joe Biden's offering a new vision of a robust middle-class economy, industrial policy, making sure that it works for working people. On Tuesday, when he stands up in the center ring of the MAGA circus, that is the story that he's likely to tell the American people.